Hello, Whispers in the Dark viewers. In today's video, I will tell you our Whispers in the Woods story. You may feel scared while listening to this story. If you are ready for horror and mystery, let's start. The crisp autumn air carried a hint of unease as Sarah and her friends made their way through the dense forest. Tall, bare trees stretched up towards the overcast sky, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. A thick fog hugged the ground, obscuring their path and casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Sarah paused, her gaze sweeping across the group. Mike, the ever-skeptical voice of reason, strode ahead with a confident gait, his brow furrowed in concentration. Jenna, the sensitive empath, walked close to Sarah, her eyes darting nervously between the towering trees. Tom, the charismatic jokester, bounded along, his laughter echoing through the stillness, while Lisa, the quiet observer, trailed behind, her expression pensive. As they reached the designated campsite, Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. This was the same forest where she had lost her sister years ago, an event that had shaped her into the pragmatic, determined young woman she was today. She took a deep breath, pushing the painful memories aside, and turned to her friends. "All right, let's get this place set up. The sun's going down, and I don't want us stumbling around in the dark." Her tone was firm, masking the unease that threatened to creep in. The group sprang into action, pitching tents and gathering firewood. Sarah watched them, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Despite the ominous atmosphere, she was grateful to have her friends by her side, a reminder that she was no longer alone in this forest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the group gathered around the crackling campfire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across their faces. Jenna's eyes gleamed with fascination as she leaned forward, her voice soft and melodic. "Have you guys ever heard the stories about this place? They say the woods are haunted by a tall, faceless figure that preys on the fears of those who dare to venture too deep." Mike scoffed, rolling his eyes. "You can't be serious, Jenna. Those are just local legends, nothing more. There's a perfectly logical explanation for everything." Sarah shot him a warning glance, sensing the tension building. "Come on, Mike. Don't be such a killjoy. It's all part of the experience. Besides, a little spooky story never hurt anyone." Jenna nodded eagerly, her gaze shifting between her friends. "They say the figure can manipulate your senses, making you see and hear things that aren't really there. And if you get too close, it'll take you, just like it took Sarah's sister all those years ago." Sarah felt the color drain from her face as Jenna's words struck a chord. She opened her mouth to speak, but Tom's boisterous laughter cut her off. "Ah, come on, Jenna, you're not gonna scare us that easily. I bet I could take on this faceless figure and come out on top." He puffed out his chest, flashing a confident grin. Lisa, who had been silent up until this point, spoke up, her voice soft and thoughtful. "The woods do have a long history of strange occurrences. My family has passed down stories for generations, warning us to be wary of the darkness that lurks within." The group fell silent, the crackling of the fire the only sound that broke the eerie stillness. Sarah could feel the tension building, the air thick with a sense of unease. She cleared her throat, desperate to steer the conversation in a more positive direction. "Well, whether or not these stories are true, we're here to have a good time. Let's focus on enjoying our weekend together. Okay?" She flashed a reassuring smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. As the night wore on, the friends traded more light-hearted tales, their laughter echoing through the trees. But try as she might, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering sense of dread that had settled in the pit of her stomach. The stories had awakened memories she had long tried to suppress, and the thought of losing another loved one in these woods filled her with a deep, consuming fear. When the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, the group retired to their tents, the sound of the wind rustling the branches the only thing that disturbed the silence. Sarah lay awake, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the darkness was closing in around them. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped, and Sarah's heart leapt in her chest. She strained her ears, listening intently, but the forest had fallen silent once more. With a deep sigh, she closed her eyes, willing herself to sleep, unaware of the tall, faceless figure that stood just beyond the tree-line, its soulless gaze fixed upon the campsite. The campfire crackled and hissed, casting flickering shadows that danced across the surrounding trees. The group sat in a loose circle, their faces bathed in the warm orange glow, but the chill in the air seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Above them, the moon hung like a pale guardian in the sky, its light struggling to pierce the thick canopy of branches. Jenna's voice broke the silence, her tone excited and tinged with unease. Did anyone else hear that? Sounded like whispering. She leaned forward, her wide eyes darting toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Mike groaned, rubbing his temples. Come on, Jenna. It's probably just the wind, or maybe an owl. Let's not turn every sound into a ghostly encounter. But Sarah had heard it too, a faint, almost imperceptible murmur carried by the wind. It was as if the forest itself was speaking, its words too soft to understand. She glanced at Lisa, who was staring into the trees, her expression unreadable. Lisa? Sarah prompted. You okay? Lisa blinked and turned to Sarah, her voice low. It feels familiar, like the woods are trying to tell us something. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I've been here before. Tom snorted, breaking the tension with an exaggerated yawn. Let me guess. Next you're gonna say the trees are alive and we're all starring in some horror movie. Relax, guys. It's just a creepy forest. But even Tom's usually lighthearted tone carried an edge of nervousness, and Sarah noticed his hands were gripping his knees a little too tightly. The whispers came again, louder this time, like a distant chorus of voices. The group froze, their laughter and banter silenced. Sarah's heart pounded as she scanned the shadows. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a flicker of something impossibly tall and thin, slipping between the trees. Did you see that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Jenna gasped, her hand clutching Sarah's arm. I saw it too. It's the figure I told you about. It's real. Mike stood abruptly, his flashlight in hand. That's it. I'm checking this out. Probably just a deer or something messing with us. Sarah grabbed his wrist, her grip firm. Don't be stupid, Mike. We don't know what's out there. Exactly, Mike shot back, his voice rising. We don't know, which is why I want to find out. Sitting here, scaring ourselves with ghost stories, isn't helping. The tension in the group was palpable now. Jenna and Lisa exchanged worried glances, while Tom tried to play it cool, though his knuckles had turned white from gripping his flashlight. I think we should try to communicate, Jenna said suddenly, her voice carrying a mix of fear and curiosity. If it's an entity, maybe it just wants to be heard. Mike threw his hands in the air. Are you kidding me? You want to talk to whatever this is? That's how every horror story ends badly. Sarah stepped between them, her voice steady but strained. Enough. We stick together, and no one does anything reckless. Got it? Tom, eager to shift the focus, puffed out his chest. Fine. If we're investigating, I'll lead the way. Someone's got to make sure we don't get lost out there. Tom, this isn't a joke, Sarah warned, but he was already standing, shining his flashlight into the trees. Relax, Sarah. I'll keep us safe, he said, though the slight tremor in his voice betrayed his confidence. Reluctantly, the group followed, their flashlights piercing the thick darkness. The whispers grew louder as they moved deeper into the woods, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. Sarah felt a growing sense of dread, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. Wait, Lisa said abruptly, stopping in her tracks. She turned her flashlight toward a gnarled tree with strange markings etched into its bark. These symbols weren't here before. The group crowded around, examining the symbols, spirals, jagged lines, and what looked like a pair of hollow eyes. Jenna traced her fingers over them, her breath hitching. It's a message, she murmured. But from who? Or what? A low, guttural sound echoed through the trees, freezing them in place. It wasn't the wind this time. It was deliberate, almost like a growl. Tom forced a laugh, though it came out shaky. Okay, maybe it's time to head back. Before he could finish, the ground beneath them seemed to vibrate, and the whispers turned into an eerie, rhythmic chant. Sarah whipped her flashlight around, her breath catching as she saw it again. The tall, faceless figure, standing impossibly still just beyond the tree line. "Run!" she screamed, her voice shattering the eerie chant. The group bolted, their flashlights bouncing wildly as they stumbled through the woods. Sarah's heart pounded as she clung to Jenna's hand, her mind racing. The whispers seemed to follow them, growing louder and more insistent. When they finally burst into the clearing where their campsite lay, they collapsed to the ground, panting. The fire was out, and their tents were torn apart, as if something or someone had ransacked the place. Lisa knelt in the dirt, her fingers trembling as she picked up a piece of cloth marked with the same strange symbols they'd seen on the tree. "It knows we're here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And it's not going to let us leave." The morning light barely broke through the dense canopy, casting the forest in a dim, grayish glow. Tensions among the group were palpable as they gathered near the ruined campsite. The night had left everyone shaken, the eerie chants and the faceless figure fresh in their minds. Mike paced back and forth, his jaw clenched. "Look, we need to stop feeding into this nonsense. Something scared us last night. Fine. But there's got to be a logical explanation. Maybe it's locals playing a prank or wildlife." "Wildlife doesn't carve symbols into trees," Sarah snapped, her patience worn thin. Jenna stood close to Sarah, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "And those whispers? You heard them too, Mike. Stop pretending you didn't." Lisa sat apart from the group, her gaze fixed on the tree-line, as though something unseen was calling to her. She hadn't spoken much since the night before, but Sarah noticed her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the dirt. Patterns disturbingly similar to the symbols etched into the trees. Tom broke the silence with a nervous laugh, running a hand through his hair. "So what's the plan? Because staying here doesn't seem like the best idea. And wandering deeper into this nightmare forest sounds even worse." Mike stopped pacing, pointing a finger at Sarah. "We leave. Now, forget this ghost story nonsense. Pack whatever's left and we go back the way we came." Sarah squared her shoulders. "And what if we can't? What if that thing is keeping us here?" "That's ridiculous," Mike said, though his voice wavered slightly. Lisa suddenly stood, her movements deliberate but dazed. "We won't find answers standing around here. I need to go." She didn't wait for a response and began walking toward the trees, her steps slow and purposeful. "Lisa," Sarah called after her, but she didn't turn around. Mike groaned, grabbing his flashlight. "I'll go get her. She's obviously freaked out. You two stay here and keep Tom from losing it." Tom opened his mouth to argue but said nothing, instead fidgeting with the strap of his backpack. As Mike disappeared after Lisa, Sarah turned to Jenna. "We can't stay here. Something is happening to this forest, and it's not going to let us out until we figure it out." Jenna nodded, her voice trembling. "I don't think it's evil, Sarah. Feels ancient, like it's watching us, judging us. I think Lisa feels it too. That's why she left." Sarah frowned but didn't argue. She felt the pull as well, a magnetic force tugging at her resolve. "Fine," Sarah said, tightening her grip on her flashlight. "But we stick together. Let's go." The forest grew darker as Sarah and Jenna ventured further from the campsite. The air felt heavier, each breath carrying a hint of decay. The strange symbols appeared more frequently, carved into trees, etched into rocks, even marked into the dirt beneath their feet. "These symbols," Jenna whispered, brushing her fingers over one, "they're warnings. Or maybe instructions?" Sarah glanced around, unease prickling her skin. "Warnings for what?" Jenna didn't answer, her attention fixed on a nearby tree. Suddenly, a distant shout echoed through the woods. It was Tom. "Help! Someone, please!" Sarah and Jenna broke into a sprint, following the sound. They found Tom a few minutes later, standing at the entrance of a cave partially hidden by overgrown vines. He was pale, his breath coming in shallow gasps. I thought I saw something," he stammered, his eyes wide. "It went in there, The cave entrance seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive. A strange hum emanated from within, making the hairs on Sarah's arms stand on end. "We can't go in there," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "That place isn't right." Tom shook his head, backing away. "No way. I'm not going in. Not after what I saw. That thing. It wasn't human." Sarah stared at the cave, torn. The rational part of her screamed to turn back, but the pull she'd felt since entering the forest was stronger now, drawing her forward. Before she could decide, the hum intensified, and the ground beneath them vibrated. A shadow moved within the cave, too fast to be natural. "Tom!" Sarah shouted as the shadow lunged forward, wrapping around him like liquid darkness. Tom's scream echoed through the forest as he was dragged into the cave. Sarah lunged after him, but Jenna grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "We can't save him if we die too," Jenna cried, her voice breaking. The hum faded, and the forest fell eerily silent. Sarah stared at the dark entrance, her fists clenched, as Jenna's grip on her arm tightened. "Tom's gone," Jenna whispered, tears streaming down her face. "What do we do now?" Sarah swallowed hard, her mind racing. The forest was closing in, and whatever force they were dealing with had just taken one of their own. "We find Lisa," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror in her chest. "And then we find a way to end this." The forest felt alive, its oppressive presence pressing down on the remaining friends as they moved through the twisting maze of trees. Every step seemed to lead them in circles, the carved symbols glowing faintly in the gloom. Sarah, Jenna, and Mike were all on edge, each consumed by their thoughts and fears. "We need to keep moving," Sarah urged, her flashlight sweeping through the shadows. "Tom could still be alive. We just need to find that cave again." "Alive?" Mike snapped, his voice shaking. "You saw what happened, Sarah. That thing, whatever it is, it's not playing games anymore. And now we've lost Lisa, too." Sarah whirled on him, her voice sharp. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't feel the weight of this? We can't give up. Not now." Mike's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes darting to Jenna, who trailed behind them. Jenna had grown eerily quiet, her usual nervous energy replaced by an almost trance-like state. She stopped frequently to touch the glowing symbols on the trees, her lips moving as if she were whispering to them. "Jenna," Sarah called, walking back toward her. "What are you doing? We need to stay together." Jenna's gaze shifted to Sarah, her expression distant yet filled with conviction. "It's trying to tell me something, Sarah. Don't you feel it? It's not just a monster. It's ancient, powerful. It knows us. I think I can understand it." "Understand it?" Mike interjected, his voice incredulous. "It just dragged Tom into a cave. You want to talk to it?" "You don't get it, Mike," Jenna said, her voice firm for the first time. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about what we've brought here, our fears, our guilt. It's feeding off of us." Mike threw up his hands, exasperated. "You've lost it. Both of you. I'm out of here." He turned to leave, but Sarah grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. "You're not going anywhere. If you walk off alone, you won't make it out alive. And staying with you two lunatics is supposed to help?" Mike shot back. Sarah's eyes flashed with anger. "Stop pretending this isn't real, Mike. You think I don't see how scared you are? Denying it won't save you, or any of us." Mike hesitated, his bravado faltering. Before he could respond, a low, resonant hum filled the air. "Do you hear that?" Jenna whispered, her eyes wide with awe. The ground beneath them trembled as a clearing materialized through the fog, illuminated by an unnatural, pulsating light. At the center stood the tall, faceless figure, its form shifting like liquid shadow. Mike froze, his rationality crumbling as the entity turned its featureless head toward them. Jenna stepped forward, her hands raised as though in supplication. "Jenna, stop!" Sarah cried, grabbing her arm. "No!" Jenna wrenched free, her voice trembling with desperation. "This is our only chance. Don't you see? It wants something from us. Maybe I can." The entity raised an elongated arm, and the air around them grew thick and suffocating. Jenna gasped, clutching her chest, and collapsed to her knees. Sarah rushed to her side, glaring at the figure. "What do you want from us?" she shouted, her voice breaking. The entity didn't speak, but the clearing around them began to shift. The glowing symbols morphed into jagged images of Sarah's sister, her face distorted in anguish. "No," Sarah whispered, her chest tightening. "This isn't real. This can't be real." The figure took a step closer, its presence overwhelming. Sarah felt her knees buckle, but she forced herself to stand, meeting the faceless void where its eyes should have been. "This is about me, isn't it?" she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "You're feeding off my guilt, my fear. But I won't let you take my friends." The entity paused, its form flickering as if uncertain. "You want me?" Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. "Fine, take me. But you let them go." "No," Mike shouted, grabbing her arm. "You can't do this." Sarah pulled free, her gaze never leaving the figure. "It's the only way. If I don't face this, none of us are getting out alive." The entity's form solidified, its arms reaching out toward Sarah. She stepped forward, her heart pounding, as the images of her sister grew sharper, the anguish replaced by a faint, sad smile. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have been there for you. I should have saved you." The entity stopped, its form trembling as though Sarah's words had struck a chord. The clearing began to collapse, the pulsating light dimming. "Run!" Sarah screamed at Mike and Jenna, who hesitated before sprinting back into the forest. Sarah turned to the figure one last time, her tears falling freely. "I won't let you win." A deafening roar filled the air as the entity dissolved into shadow, the clearing imploding in a burst of light. Mike and Jenna stumbled through the woods, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as they reached the campsite. Behind them, the forest grew silent. "Where's Sarah?" Jenna whispered, her voice raw with emotion. Mike shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. She didn't make it." The two stood in silence, the weight of their loss pressing down on them. The forest seemed quieter now, as though it had claimed what it wanted. As they turned to leave, a faint whisper echoed through the trees. A voice that sounded like Sarah's, saying, "You're free now." Forever changed, they walked away, leaving the haunted forest behind. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked our video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like our video, and share your thoughts with us in the comments.